So, story alchemy. It's the sacred process of turning your own experiences into healing stories that build connections with the community you wish to serve. And, this applies to anyone who wants to tell stories and be heard and to help others know that they're not alone. But it's particularly powerful for transformation professionals like you who are here to offer healing and hold space for others' evolution. Now, before we dive into the alchemy of story, I want to really dive into the why of our storytelling, particularly for those of us who are the coaches, who are the therapists, who are the healers. There's unique reasons why we're here to tell stories and to use them to build connection, because stories do create connection, right? As we've heard from Brene Brown and lots of other writers, humans are the storytelling animals. We are here in order to share our insights and our visions and to learn and teach one another through language, through the experiences that get wrapped up in narratives that have a beginning and a middle and end. These are the things that build relationships. They build them in families, they build them in tribes. They're really the hallmark of our humanity. And so as those of us who are deeply called to show up in our full humanity, we want to be sure that we're really using one of the strongest tools in our toolbox. Another thing that stories do is that stories invite healing. That's knowing that ability to say, I've been through this. I've endured all of these things. I stand here now. I tell you about them in order for you to see yourself in my story and for you to know that you're seen. Because there's a relationship in these stories that we're looking at. It certainly starts with you looking within and saying, what do I need to say? But it's also you looking outward and saying, what do people need to hear from me? It's about this really building a relationship. Excuse me. And finally, stories can change the world. And, that feels like a really brave and crazy thing to say. But if stories can't change the world, what can, right? I don't want to live in a world, and I don't think you do either, where the only world-changing events are wars and natural disasters. I want to live in a world that's more subtle and gentle, and that's really based on human interaction and one-to-one being together. And, when you I want you to feel invited to really believe in the subtle power of words and the way they change us and the way they change the collective. So there's actually a way in which we can think about the ways that stories change the world by simply looking at the ancient alchemists themselves. So we can thank them for giving us this word that we're using today to understand storytelling. But, we know that they were the scientists and the philosophers of their time. And they were on a quest to turn everyday metals into something that was truly valuable, like gold, right? So did they ever succeed at that? As far as we know, they never really managed to change the molecular structure of lead and turn it into something that really glittered. But what if we think about metaphysics rather than chemistry? What if we think about spiritual riches rather than material riches? Did they manage to make modifications to the soul? There's students of alchemy and mystery traditions who will tell you that the real work of alchemists wasn't about, greed and building material wealth, but it was the pursuit of spiritual enlightenment, right? So I think we could certainly say that in and of itself has always been more valuable than gold, right? So, and, whether or not they succeeded at, these sort of esoteric or material ways of that kind of transformation, they transformed culture. Because here we are, thousands of years later, the first alchemists were in the first century. And here we are sitting in 2019. And we are relying on their stories, the legends of these people, in order to understand something about where we are now, right? We know more about transformation because they existed. So right there, the stories of the alchemists have shifted the world, and they're going to continue to do so as you and I do more to, practice this thing we call story alchemy. So we've thought about story, we've thought about alchemy. I want to think about who we all are as healers of some kind, as transformation professionals. This idea of to be a healer is to facilitate another's awakening. This is something that I learned from my own longtime healing teacher and mentor, Eleonora Amendolara. And I'll be talking a little bit more about her and her influence on me and my work in a little while. But, when she offered this idea, which in so many ways is like a job description, right? I was new into healing. I was kind of about to be going into my transformation from working in academia into working for myself. And it really has meant so much to me as I kind of learned to sort out my own goals and responsibilities, both as a healer who writes and as a writer who heals. My job, our job, is to facilitate another's awakening. And that may be with hands-on healing, that may be with all different kinds of therapeutic techniques that you know how to do, but it's also through the stories that we tell. And this could be within the context of a session. Sometimes it's really helpful to share elements of your own life and your own experience with the right boundaries, of course, in order to help other people feel seen, in order to help them know that you have a point of connection and that you too can be a bit vulnerable and show up in this space. And you do this instinctively. And it also may be part of your training, that you know when to selectively disclose, or however you want to think about it. But for the purposes of today, the reason why I want to talk about story alchemy is the way we use story to make first contact with potential clients, or that we strengthen bonds we already have with a community of people that we want to work with, that we want to serve, that we want to collaborate with. And these stories that we can learn how to tell, they are what help you from going from being, just another blip in the social media feed to something like, oh, I think I know her, to, oh my gosh, I adore her stuff and I've been stalking her on Facebook and Instagram forever. And then eventually they become clients and advocates for your work, right? I'm just going to pause for half a second because I see a couple of questions coming in and I can't check them all on full screen. But I just want to make sure everybody's good. Okay, everybody sounds great, and I'm so happy everybody's happy so far. Let's dive back in, and we'll keep going with this. So what I just described is this idea of marketing. We might not like that word. I have had all sorts of feelings about that word, but this idea of putting our stories out there in order to attract people to come to work with us, in order to let people know, hi, I'm here to help you. This is in and of itself an act of marketing, right? So Seth Godin, he's such a sage, and you can come to him from so many different angles, and that's part of his magic. But look at this quote right here, right? You see marketing appears a couple times. What if instead you change that to healing is the generous act of helping someone solve a problem, their problem. Healing helps others become who they seek to become. There's a way in which these things are incredibly, there's a lot in common here, right? So as we're going through this, I would encourage you, if one of the things that I offer you today is to take out some of that difficult charge you may have around this whole concept of, oh, marketing gives me hives. Let's put this in this context and remember, this is part of storytelling. This is part of connection. This is part of your birthright as a human who's here to help, right? So I realize that a lot of you know me, but I want to be sure that you know a certain story about me, certain elements about me that you may not necessarily know because I don't necessarily lead with them, right? So first, you may know that before I dive in, I'm going to give you one quick thing. Sorry, guys. Thanks for hanging with me on the techie bits. So you may know that I'm a writing coach, and that I help healers and therapists and coaches and others who want to use stories and language to make the world more beautiful, bearable, and bold. And there's this part of me that's really focused on words and on structure and on the practical stuff, and helping people earn a livelihood through their magic, right? And this version of me, she buys clothes at Banana Republic, preferably when they're on sale, right? We like her. She does a lot of really great things. And then there's this other version of me that is the story healer side of me. And of course, now there's no great body in the sky who gives out names to story healers and says, this is what you are. I figured out how to claim this. And it came from everything that I know from being a copywriter and a writing coach and all of these practical pieces, and then infusing it with the other side of me, which is the side of me that has studied at a mystery school for 12 years, that has been doing energy healing since I was in college. It's the part of me that knows I can depend on my intuition even more than I can depend on the knowledge that I've gained through entrepreneurship. And it's the part of me that's going to offer the mystical and offer a tarot card instead of offering let's go through this is a system that I know works. Let's take you through these steps. And if you do it just like this, you'll be wicked famous and amazing. Like, screw that. Doesn't work. Then I've tried it. I can't do it. Instead, it's my artistry that comes out. And, it's the part of me that has a wardrobe that would make Stevie Nicks very proud. So that part of me, I have offered in little pieces and bits here and there. But I think another thing I want us to take away from today is the sense that some of the most important work we do as healers, as transformation professionals, is to show up fully in the marketplace of ideas. And, that means that we're called to integrate our magical, nearly impossible to describe healing modalities into this desire to be really clear and really accessible to those who need us. Because when we can start to do those two things, to marry those two pieces of ourselves, that's when it gets really good, right? So, I offer you this picture of myself in Ireland last year, and I was on Achill Island. It was windy as all get out because it's the full catastrophe of me right there. Like when all else fails, there's hair in my face, and I'm fully in it, right? And that's where I want all of us to be, is fully in that wind of being in our favorite place and expressing it to others in some way. And I know this is hard to do. Like I said, I have struggled with it for years. I have offered way more Banana Republic me or way more Stevie Nicks me on these like two polar ways without necessarily marrying them together. But it's this integration point that I know is where my momentum is coming from now. That is saying, oh, there's a shift in my work. There's, the way I can bring myself fully to the table, that the power of my ideas is magnified because I'm going to give you input into their origins. So I mentioned before my teacher, Eleonora Mendelara, that I've been a student at the Sacred Center Mystery School for a long time. There we study something called chumpy illumination. And actually, the chumpy part comes from these stones from Peru that have been found in sacred sites across the Andes. And they're just one piece of the pie. I'm going to hold on to one right now. Each one of them has a different, there's 12, and they each represent a different facet of human consciousness. I'm holding one right now that's for harmony. And, that's important for all of us writers, right? To think about that. So, the details of this aren't as salient right now. If you're ever curious, I'd love to tell you more about it. But in this tradition, we integrate a lot of different bits of wisdom and knowledge from many, many different traditions. And we rely on some of the ancient principles of symbols and on sacred geometry. So as someone who's been obsessed with words as long as I have been, like ever since I could read, this idea of relying on symbols and shapes and sacred mathematics always was very it was frightening to me, and it was a growth edge, but it's always been really necessary, because in so many ways it is, it's the stretch and the solace, right? Because another thing I'd like for you to take away from today, and this is just, again, planting the seed of an idea, is that amazing verbal creatures that we are, right? We think in words, we offer, we, can communicate so much. Before anything becomes a word, it has an energetic resonance. It has a shape to it. And when we can tap into that knowledge that there's something underneath our stories that comes even before worrying about what the inner critic would say about how we express it, we're tapping into something really powerful that can really help hold us. Because before letters and sentences, there is something else. And we're doing this work of translation without even knowing it, as we put feelings and memories and fears and hopes into language. So the stuff I'm going to teach you today is actually based on, yes, my experiences as a writer and a writing coach, but also as my experience as a mystery school student, as somebody who's saying, yeah, sacred geometry and alchemy, they help me understand the bigger picture. My soul work is helping my professional work. And the more I can show that in a really clear way, the more powerful I become as a healer, as someone who can help, as someone who's here to, keep a roof over everybody's head, right? So I'm going to take you into a little bit of sacred geometry. I've got a couple things, a couple comments I need to check on, see how everybody's doing. Oh my gosh, Abby has a random chumpy. That makes my heart so happy. We have to talk about this. Okay, let's get back into the presentation. Oop, I gotta get rid of it. So, you have all come here today to see this amazingly executed graphic. I did it myself. This is you. This is you and your cup of experience. This is everything that you are. This is your pain that's resolved or isn't resolved. It's the information, it's the knowledge, it's the wisdom you've gained. This is you and all that you have to offer. Okay? This is your ideal client reader. This is the mountain that they are trying to climb right now. They're struggling to get up, they don't have a map, and they're not quite sure they can trust their own strength. Now, there's something important to note here. As transformation professionals, there's a really good chance that you've created a career or a practice or, even your goal of putting something together based on a solution that you've found for yourself, based on trying to solve a problem that you yourself have struggled with. So there's a very good chance that you have already navigated this mountain. And there's moments when you're certainly feeling like you're still on it. But you've climbed high enough that you have this sense of mastery and this ability to offer some sort of help. Because when you put your experience that you have gathered in this life and the mountain that they are trying to climb, you create something of really potent possibility. Again, I drew it myself, guys. I know, it's amazing. This is that diamond. See that diamond in the middle, right? So this is where the magic happens. It's when you and your reader meet. You create this golden opportunity, let's say. It's where you've taken these carefully chosen stories about what you've gone through, about what you've endured, and you meet your reader's struggles. This is where inspiration happens. This is where you can reach people and let them know that you really see them. And it's how you show that you're here to help. And of course, if we're thinking about the alchemists, right? They took those base metals and turned them into gold. And we can also think about the sense that this is a diamond, right? A diamond is carded. It's been put under a heck of a lot of pressure, that's gone through some amazing process and got turned into something that we see as really, really valuable. So our next step is to start talking about the 5 steps of doing story alchemy, because it's one thing to give you this beautiful image, which again, I do believe is, and it's another thing to figure out how to put this in practice. But I want to open us up. Do we have any questions that you want to pop into the chat before we go on? Because we're going to start, this is kind of gets us into a little more of our how-to. That's what we're doing today. Anybody have any questions so far? Okay, awesome. Let's keep going then. And we'll start with step number 1. The first step of, actually, I'm going to turn a little background. Let me see if I can mute anybody. Okay, awesome, better. So step number 1 in story alchemy is either the story you long to tell or the story you need to tell. These 2 things may actually be one and the same, but there's some distinctions that are important to make here. So the story you long to tell is that thing, and there may be many things. We're going to speak about this singularly. You can certainly do this alchemy work with any number of stories in your lives. We'll speak as if there's one story, right? So this is the thing that's in your cup of experience that you know in your gut you have to share with the world. And it might be a moment of insight, a moment of beauty, just something you know would add some light to the world. That's that story you long to tell. You're like, this is delicious. I need to give it, right? There also is from the other side, a second here. Let's try to make sure we get everybody muted. There's more talented ways to do this one now. The other side of this is the story you need to tell. And this is maybe a problem that you've struggled with in the past. It's something you've already done your healing around. We're going to talk a little more about how to make that distinction about what are the right stories to tell a little further in. But you begin with your heartbreak and your struggle. It's the stuff that you have survived and figured out how to thrive in. And it's the thing that you got through and you learned from, and that in telling it to other people, you'll be helping people, inspiring them that you do the same. Now, you may have, filled a dozen journals working through this problem already, and it may just be the thing that you think about in the shower over and over again. And you might have even built your entire brand and website around solving this problem already. We're all at various stages in terms of how aware of the story we long to and must tell might be. And you may find that, okay, so this is important to go into too, is that, when you're writing consistently about the same problem, because I'm assuming all of us have done some writing here before, right? That we're not all new to this game. We've done this in support of our work. You may find that you're writing around the same thing because well, this is what I write about because this is what I do. I'm an eating disorder specialist. I'm a coach for women who are going through divorce. I know what my wheelhouse is, right? So in order to tell stories that reach people who are already in your niche, if you've got it established, you don't necessarily have to have gone through exactly what they've gone through. Like, you don't necessarily have to have experienced the same capital T trauma as the people you work with. As a professional, you know that yourself. You can show up and help people even if you don't exactly know what it is they've gone through. Say you're an addictions counselor and you yourself haven't gone through that, right? Or that you're in a stage of your own process where you're not able to tell stories about addiction. Instead, you can find something that's more universal. You can meet your ideal client readers where they are. Maybe you talk about, isolation and loneliness, and that feeling that, sometimes you have a sense that there's nowhere to turn. These are all valid in this. We know that not every single story is going to come ripped directly from our own lives, but for the purposes of story alchemy, as we're talking about this today, I really want to keep us focused on, turning the stories that have happened to you that you really feel the need to tell for some reason into something that's going to connect with readers. And so when you're looking for a problem to write about, I want to encourage you to think about it more that you're looking within rather than looking at a list of pain points that you might have established in some sort of, marketing worksheet, right? Because, the magic of the story you're going to tell in this way depends on your personal investment in it. This is not, if you've hung with me this long, you kind of probably figured out, like, I'm not here to give you the formula for writing your next 10 best ways to blog post. This is meant to conjure a different kind of writing. So this is a moment to take out a pen and piece of paper and just jot down your first kind of original impulses around the stories that you long to tell and the stories that you need to tell. And you can keep adding to this list, but just start thinking about these ways in which you're already thinking, oh, this story wants to meet my potential client readers in a certain way. And so just, jot a few down. And it'll give you a great start after this call when you start thinking about what you're going to be writing into first. And again, if you have any questions, pop them into the chat and I'll see what I can do to help you. But the stories you long to tell, the stories you need to tell. And maybe there's things you've already written about, but you're getting excited to talk about in a new way because there's something we've already discussed here that has you thinking, oh, I want to add a different spin to this. Because we are, one of the greatest things I've ever learned as a person who's written a lot of things in the online world is that repurposing is your best friend in the whole wide world. Because A, there's almost always more to say. B, you can never assume that people have written everything. You've read everything you've written. And C, I know my alphabet. It's exhausting to keep putting words out into the world. You can go back, I think I'd shared at the beginning of this session that I haven't taught in a long time. It's been 3 years. But when I went back and looked at, I used to teach something called the story triangle. I'm like, oh, there's good stuff here. I repurposed the quotes from that one because there are these really smart writers who've taught us how to tell stories that connect. So let's move on. Remember, you can come back to this list at any time, but it's always a great tool for any storyteller to just have the back of your notebook just be bullet points of I could talk about this or this or this or this. With any luck, when you go back to that list later, you'll actually know what the heck you were talking about. So give yourself just enough to say, if you write blueberries, hopefully that's a moment that's important enough that oh, the blueberry story, of course. And you'll know to come back to it. So point number 2 in this story alchemy step by step is the self-focused first draft. Now, this is the most important piece of the entire story alchemy process. And it's also the piece that you're going to most likely want to skip or skim over because you're going to think you can. Especially if this is something that is long-standing for you. If you're basing so much of your work on a certain story, something you've survived or gone through, you've worked on this, you've talked to a therapist, you've written journal entries about this before. And you're also going to be thinking about the fact that well, wait a minute, I'm writing this to help other people. I better get to that part where I'm, putting together paragraphs that I can publish, right? But to make a story work, you need to pour yourself onto the page. No censorship, no fear that anyone's looking over your shoulder. Because if you skip over this part, if you try to leave out some of the, the real raw, messy stuff in order to get to and then it all worked out in the end, no one cares about the solution. And again, these are not necessarily things that show up for you to share publicly. And this is the energy healer in me speaking, but this is also just the smart writer in me speaking, that there are layers underneath our words. There are, the smart readers paying attention can tell the intention and the foundation that's underneath. And if you try to build a house on stilts that really actually has a 3-level basement, they're going to be able to tell. And we don't have time to really sit in and do this writing practice today. If you've come to any of my past free community writing practices, that's the time when we do this work. What I'm inviting you to do in the community writing practices we do, and also in the Sovereign Writer Circle, where we meet and write together every Wednesday, it's that place to really start developing these self-focused first drafts and giving yourself permission to do this. When we meet in the Sovereign Writer Circle, some people come and they're working on polishing blog posts and, things that got to get done. But I offer 2 brand new writing prompts every week because I want to really encourage people to meet themselves on the page in a really fresh way. Like, this is where we start, laying out those base metals that we're going to turn into the gold. You need to see them all. I think sitting in a group where they were dedicated to doing this, you become less likely to skip over this step, because you start to kind of get addicted to it, because this is where the magic is. This is where I'm doing my own healing as well. This is part of self-care. And then I'm going to keep rolling with this and telling the whole story. So after you've done this self-focused first draft, there's the rest. There is the point where you go outside and you do what this lady is doing, right? I'm giving you the same image of a woman doing this and talking about writing. There is no pen in her hand, but she right here is doing the other most important piece of the writing process, because her job is to get away from the page. Your job is to get away from the page long enough that you start to get clear and you're ready to go back and say, when you look at what you've written, oh, this is mine. This is a detail I needed to put down there. This is just so I could help tell the story from A to Z. This is something, I haven't actually healed that part yet. But this part right here, this is part of that universal collective story that needs to be told. This is what someone needs to hear from me. Because, writing itself depends on butt in seat. That's writing. But good writing, that's what depends on playing outside and your meditation practice and really good orgasms and well-cooked meals and playing with your kids and all those other things that you do to be a complete and whole human who's ready to show up on the page and tell the entire story that matters to people. So, I want you to remember too, you can also do other kinds of writing here. This isn't just put down the pen completely, but it's just let your stories rest for at least, 3 days, at least. And another moment just to pause here, and because I know you've all done successful writing in the past, right? You have written something that's touched people, whether it was a great blog post or a newsletter that got people to take the action you wanted them to, or it was the toast at your best friend's wedding. Think for a minute about what went into creating that experience that didn't have anything to do with writing. And just create for yourself a little list of, these are the things that I do in order to tell stories that don't actually look like me with a pen in my hand or me with a laptop. Because keeping a list of what keeps your, your creative pencil sharpened, what keeps your creative perspective open, what helps you be with the hard things and be clear enough to say the things that matter, that's a really important part of this too. Because an alchemist takes care of all the different variables. We know that an alchemist is a scientist, right? They would look at the formulas and say, how do I repeat this experiment so that it is successful? How do you repeat your own experiments so you can be successful? And again, that's a list to come back to, but just remember the ways you support yourself as a storyteller, because writing is not easy. It takes endurance. And sometimes it's just physically, you really can hurt yourself by sitting too long, right? And it's also the emotional endurance to say, wow, I'm going to sit with a hard story. And I'm going to develop the strength and resilience that it takes in order to share the story with somebody else who's going to need it. Okay, let's move on to step 4, which is the alchemy itself, right? So this is that process when you're really doing the active work of transforming all of the lead, all of the raw, roughed draft into that golden final draft that people are going to read. And so in this stage, you're going to do a lot of deleting. But instead of doing that, I want to encourage you to first do a lot of like copying and pasting and rewriting, because this process, as we've talked about, is about self-care and self-discovery as much as it is about producing something for other people, right? So when you allow yourself to be an historian of your own process, when you say, you know what I wrote here was valid and important, even if it's for nobody else's eyes but mine, I'm at least going to keep it in a file. I think you're showing yourself that your voice matters and that your process matters. Because if we end up being obsessed only with, I hit publish and I got X number of people reading this piece, we're going to burn out. Your writing wants to give back to you at lots of different levels, and you can give back to it simply by respecting the process that you went through. So copy, paste, rewrite, sit down, do alchemy. How do we do that, right? So my sovereign writers had a preview of this class on Monday during our monthly writing, coaching, and story healing session. And I asked them, what's missing? And what they told me was they really want more of the how in the alchemy stage. And I smiled because I realized that's the hardest part, right? Telling you the how of this is the piece that I might be most likely to gloss over, because part of me is like, oh, no, it's magic. You just sit down and do it. That's not what you all need from me, right? I'm here to be your teacher today, not just the one who says, sit, write, see what happens. Because it is about sitting and writing and seeing what happens. But how can I want to hold you in this alchemy process. So I've got 3 different ways for you to know that you're on the right track when you're doing this work. Ultimately, I cannot make you sit down and write. I can give you permission and space to do that one day a week, but that's absolutely essential. But there's other pieces to this. So I want to offer you the Glennon and Brene filters. So Glennon Doyle, Brene Brown, 2 of the most important women writers of our time right now. They are helping us figure out how to be human in so many ways. And they're guiding lights, right? And they're really, we often, talk about them in the same breath. They're really different. And yet there's a lot in common. So I love both of these. There's 2 quotes from them. So if you're going to share widely, make sure you're sharing from your scars, not from your open wounds. We've talked about this idea of this is your own healing work, but you're doing it in order to help others, right? So you've got to, you're going to be aware of where you are in this process. And on a similar vein, Brene gives us this other idea of the stories that she shares are things that she's processed. And her healing isn't contingent on how she's heard and how she's received, because she's done that work. And she's done the alchemy. And now she says, here, I've made this thing. Take of it what you will. It doesn't really affect me one way or the other. If you don't like this story, maybe you'll read another one, or maybe I'll write for somebody else, right? So there's a lot of similarities between Brene and Glennon, right? But I do believe there's some really important distinctions. And I want you to start getting an idea of whether or not you're a Glennon or you're a Brene. And that's not necessarily based on whose work you like best, but it really depends more on who you are and what your goal is to do in this world. So, Glennon, blogger turned best-selling memoirist, right? And I know she's so much more than this, but she's a professional truth teller, right? She's doing work in the world by showing up and telling her story. On the other hand, we have Brene, who's a researcher turned best-selling nonfiction writer, and she's a professional academic, and you turn to her for information that's going to help you shape what you do next, right? So if you think about Glennon on one side, you think about Brene on the other, who is it that you would go to for help on how to do the thing, it's Brene, right? So she's the one who's giving you steps. She's the one who, she herself studied as a social worker. So she would be set up to say, hi, I'm the person you come to for help. And she's modeled that for us in her really highly curated stories. If you think about, she tells us a story of her marriage in which, she's upset because her husband Steve is swimming faster than her. And it opens up all these different wounds that reveal a lot about their past. She's really told you a story that's very well contained, and then leaps into helping you understand your own stuff. On the other hand, you think about Glennon and writing Love Warrior, and that's like 250 pages of all the things. Again, carefully curated. She made sure she'd healed it well enough that it could be received. However, she was going to be okay regardless. But end of the day, you're not going to Glennon for help. You're going to her for like, okay, there's a sister. There's a sister walking along beside me. And there's Brene, and you're going, oh, well, that's the lady at the front of the room who's going to help me. And if you're in a place right now where you're writing in order to build a professional practice, in order to help people see that you're the one to be able to help them, you want to be more of the Brene variety. And so, keep kind of playing with that and sort of sit with that. And maybe you have your own two writers who would help you fill that in. But, as a transformation professional writing for her work, you're not a memoirist, you're a creative nonfiction writer who is using story in order to teach. And that can be very different than like, let me tell you something, right? So another way to know that you're on the right track with this story alchemy work and know whether or not it's going to work for you is to check in with your body and to know that, the body knows more than our brains do. Like if you find you're like running to the bathroom in whatever sort of distress after pressing publish, sit with that. That might be like, it's important to feel, but that may be too much feeling. I love Eleanor Roosevelt and our whole idea of do something each day that scares you, but just check in with yourself on what's good scared and what's not so good scared, right? Your physical reactions can really teach you a lot when you become a student of the body. What does sweaty palms mean? Sweaty palms always happen when you click send in a newsletter. Okay, great. That's just what happens. That's amazing. Today I had the sweatiest palms in the world before starting today's call. I sat down on the meditation cushion for 5 minutes. I built in just enough time. And I knew that if that could center me, then I was doing the right thing. I was taking the right kind of risk, right? And also notice that when you put something out into the world and you feel nothing, be curious about that. That might mean that you have just processed your idea into dust and you no longer have a heart connection to it anymore. It might mean that you've put up such powerful barriers between yourself and your own self-expression you can't feel. Be curious about that and wonder. I can't tell you what that means other than it means something if you don't feel anything when you're doing this, because this is supposed to give you the feels, right? And the third way you can kind of check in with, hey, am I doing this alchemy thing in a way that's aligned with who I am and what I want to do, is to develop a community of readers and confidants. They have people who can act as your second gut check. These people aren't necessarily there to help you with your grammar, but they're here to help you with the emotional structure of your work. Questions you can ask them is like, hey, did you feel the feels when you read this thing? You can ask them, hey, did you feel like you learned from me in this? Or did you feel like you wanted to come and heal me? That can help. Someone can help reflect back on like, I think you thought you were saying this, but you were actually saying that. And again, this idea of community, that's why I have the Sovereign Writer Circle. This is what we do for each other all the time, is act as that kind of hive mind, where we can incubate our stories from the beginning and saying like, I think I'm going to write about this thing. How do I do it? Because when you're walking beside people who are in the same process, who've been down this before, it's invaluable. So remember that, writing is a solitary practice. but you don't have to do it alone, especially when you're talking about the stuff that's hardest to talk about. So this takes us to number 5, which is, we've kind of touched on this. This is the courage to share your story with the community who needs it. Because again, this is more than quote unquote just journaling. Story Alchemy is about the kind of writing that's going to get out in the world and become a moving, breathing entity out there. And, you know, this is about pressing publish on your blog post. This is about putting it out there in your newsletter. And this is about making decisions about, you know, how high on the rooftops you're going to scream it in the social media world, right? I want you to be both gentle and strategic during this step, because through Story Alchemy, please remember that you've done, you know, delicate, important work. And this taking this personal story, something you really care about, and transforming it into something that's ready for public consumption, it's a big deal. So feeling safe in this process is really important, and pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone before you're ready isn't necessarily, you know, the good hurt kind of way. This is like not the feel the burn you want, right? Because in time you become more and more comfortable with this process, and it does get easier. But just know that this is not necessarily simple in its process. You know, Story Alchemy is just this, it's a beautiful and important part of my creative life and my healing life. And I want you to figure out ways to make it part of yours. You know, I said, we're getting towards the kind of the end of me talking part. I would love us to open up to some questions. And on the other side of that, I want to offer you, you know, my solutions for ongoing how you can do this Story Alchemy work. Because it is something you could run with this today, and I'd be so excited to know what comes from it for you. But I also know that, you know, community support and just having a guide who can walk beside you and help you learn how to check your gut and help you figure out, this is the story that I need to tell and why. There's a lot of value in that. So I'll tell you about a little more of the Sovereign Writer Circle, a little bit more about working with me individually. And actually, there's something that I've got cooking for tomorrow, some free alchemy conversations. And I would love to offer you a slot. But let's talk about that in a second. I would love for us to open up to some questions. If you want to unmute yourself, I'd love to hear from you, or you can use the chat box and just let me know if there's anything that you're wondering about, anything that you want to share that came through for you. I'd love to hear your voice.
Marissa, this whole thing has been kind of interesting for me because I feel like I've been doing a lot of work. I went to Casey's retreat in November, and I've done some work with Harmony and her retreat and whatnot. And I'm kind of in a transition phase in my work, I think. So I'm looking at what the reason I'm here was to explore story as a way to see what else I could bring to the table besides the technical stuff that I do. And I'm not as much a transformation healer as maybe many others are. I'm a learning consultant. So I work with adult learning. Yeah, I do. In fact, when I first started my business, I actually wanted to have a website that was Learning Alchemist. I mean, I love the word, and that unfortunately was already taken. So I'm the learning evangelist. Which is, you know, so I want to bring more story into my work, and I'm in the process of trying to figure out how to do that. So listening to you got me thinking about the journey that I took to get where I am. Because the transformations, I really believe in the power of learning. I'm a almost pathological lifelong learner. And part of what I want to do in life is inspire others to see the value of learning.
Mm.
And so I've been trying to figure out what stories do I have that I could tell that might go to that. And most of the people that are my clients right now are professionals.
Mm-hmm.
They're people that run learning departments in organizations, or they're subject matter experts who have to lead learning and they don't know how to do it, you know, that kind of thing. So I'm kind of rambling a little bit here because I'm not sure there's a question here other than what you've talked about has given me some things to think about. And I'm glad you recorded because I want to listen to it again.
Awesome. I don't think you're rambling. I love all that information about you because I realized I know Kathy, she's amazing. Haven't had a chance to, get to know you and where you come from in your work wise. I mean, I think, yes, I come from the energy healing world and there's a certain vernacular around that, but transformation professional holds us in anybody who knows that we're doing work that makes the world a better place, like it's just like, all right, you don't sell some widget on the, the back of the magazine. Cool. We're in probably, right? You're coming from a good place. We're there. I just want to remind you that, even, I think we sometimes get confused. Like, well, I'm talking to people in organizations making decisions. They're people and they still need story to help them find their way in because they're probably looking to tell the story of their own organization. Like, we're at the point where everyone's starting to understand the currency of stories in these ways. And that your stories matter to them because their stories matter to them personally. Yes, they're thinking about this in a more global sense than just saying, oh, I need a personal healer. But we're always dealing with the individual themselves and their specific wants and needs and what's going to get them saying, oh, that lady, opposed to that, like, beige box of learning tools. Like, I want the woman who told me that story that makes me excited to sit down with her and have her sit with my team because she's going to inspire them and not just give them like, well, gray, beige, or ivory. Like, you get the whole rainbow.
And one of the things that really resonated with me that you said was that, the Banana Republic and Stevie Nicks, because I am finally learning, in the last work I've done over the last few months, is trying to bring in more of the unicorn, the Tiggercorn, as I called her at camp. Marissa and I were in camp GLP, and I have a side of me that dresses like a pirate at the Renaissance Fair, that wears Tigger ears to conferences and dresses up in unicorn onesies. So I'm trying to figure out, and look at how I can bring that side of me into the work we do. Because I've very clearly separated them until the last couple of years. And I'm starting to bring it more into the work I do.
I'm wondering if part of your way in is that fact that what do you know about bringing these other facets of your personality, how they help open people up to learn something new?
Yeah.
Just that story yourself of why I decided to start showing up with Tigger ears. Like, that could be a huge story as to like, oh, and this is what started to, like, almost your case study in Tigger ears. Like, once I started doing this, I started to become, I know Kathy as the woman in the Tigger ears for a reason. And that in of itself is a unique piece that helps me be more excited to learn from her.
Yeah. And there is a reason I wear them and it works. So,
right.
And it opens conversations. It makes people smile.
Yeah.
I was at just 2 seconds. I was at a conference at Disney World at one of their properties, and I've always loved Tigger, and I got this headband with Tigger ears, and I started wearing them. I bought them at the conference and started wearing them around the conference just for the fun.
Right.
And I can't tell you how many smiles it generated. If nothing else, they walked by and smiled.
Right.
How many conversations it opened. Oh, why are you wearing Tigger ears? And then, conversations went out. So it was one of the things I did at camp last summer. I set an intention before camp. I said, I want to meet and talk to as many people as I can. So I'm going to be wearing Tigger ears. Look for me, find me. And I had some great conversations. So
Yeah.
that's
So
the short version of the story.
Right. But that reminds us too, like, when we're looking at these stories, it isn't necessarily like our deepest, darkest pain here that we're looking to transform into a story. Like, they can be really light, but it speaks to our humanity in a way that, like, hey, it helped me feel more like I could have open conversations with people. And that speaks to the difficulty we all have with opening up and being vulnerable and saying hi first. That in and of itself is an important place to go with this. We're not necessarily talking about childhood trauma in all of this. Sometimes we are, but sometimes it's like,
there's that too, but that's another day.
Right, exactly. But this can meet us at whatever level we need it to be. And maybe something you start in the first process of that the self-focused first draft is really like, oh my God, I can't tell them about that. But actually it's connected to this. I'm going to take them in this middle level. We stay open to these different sort of bits of surprise that come in along the line. So
yeah, makes a lot of sense. So I'll shut up and let somebody else talk.
Oh no, Kathy, it's wonderful. Thank you so much. I know we have so many commonalities. Actually, Harmony is going to be a guest in the Sovereign Writers Circle in a couple months, because she's a woman who's a really phenomenal community builder, business owner, who has a lot to say about using inclusive language. Because that's something we all want to be really aware of right now, is how we show up in terms of, I have my story to tell, I have my lens through which I'm telling it, and I want to make sure that I'm not just telling it to people who just look like me, because my brain's expanded, but I haven't figured out how to express that yet.
And she's going to be perfect for that.
Yeah. Harmony and I had an amazing conversation just about the awkwardness that's inherent in this process of just, whether it's trying to figure out what pronouns to use, or, what it means to say we have a group for women and how has that shifted. Like, these things really matter. Like, that's part of the conversations that I want us all to start being able to have. Because if we look around right now in our desire to awaken, it can start to feel like a new conspiracy to silence us, because we can find lots of reasons to shut up, because we recognize, for whatever reason, we may be standing in privilege, we may have been oblivious to stuff in the past, we may be full of shame, all these different things. The answer is to listen more, yes, and it's also to figure out how to be able to speak your truth in a way that can be heard by more people, by your specific people you're trying to reach. Yes, this ideal client work is important, but how do you show up in this bigger marketplace of ideas and say things that are true and that are sensitive and that matter in this kind of changing climate, which we're so privileged to live in, even when it's hard. So, does anybody else have any other questions or observations? Or this has been so amazing. I'm so grateful to all of you for having been with us today. Anybody want to give us a chance? But before we'll close with my invitations to you for what's next. Okay, so, great. Thank you, Lynn. I'm great to know you're listening and learning. I'm glad you're here. So I've dropped my breadcrumbs along the way here in terms of, what the work is that I do. And I'll own my own process, where I would have in many ways just sort of made sure I, hid the promise of what it is that I offer. And I think we're all called as healers, as transformation professionals, to just be really honest about, like, hi, this is how I'm here to help, right? So I've mentioned the Sovereign Writers Circle. That's where we meet 6 times a month to write 4 times, and we talk 2 other sessions. And we've been meeting for 15 months now, 5 seasons of such amazing change and transformation that it's really this works at the heart of what I do, and creating this community has been really the biggest privilege that I've ever been able to have as a professional. This kind of building this cauldron of trust and being able to say, hey, this is where we show up and we put out the hard stuff and we talk about how to change it and transform it. And so I'm going to put the link to the group in the chat so you guys can see it. I rather than go back to the slides right now, I want to be able to, keep us talking and not, I do appreciate everyone who rolled with me as I figured out the magical world of how much I can do when I'm sharing slides. But, here's the link for the Sovereignty Circle if you're interested. We are welcoming new members on April 1st. And, if it's not time for you to think about this kind of ongoing commitment, because we invite people to come in for 3 or 6 months, I also do one-on-one work. You go to marisagowdy.com and check out my story healing sessions. You'll see what that looks like. And that could be, a one-shot where we sit down and just talk about this story you think you want to tell, but you're not quite sure how to yet. A lot can happen in just an hour. But the other thing that I want to offer to you is tomorrow I have blocked up my whole day to have some alchemy conversations. And this is that chance, 20 minutes where I would love for you to tell me your story. And at the end, I'll offer you some potential solutions I might have for you that may include, hey, let's set up another session, or maybe you want to join the group. But mostly, I want to give you that chance to kind of talk through your story. And the story you might think you might potentially, perhaps, I think someday, maybe I think I could tell, right? And, turn that into something that starts to feel a little more real to you. Because I think as we start to give word and language and just speak aloud the things that we want to say that we may have perhaps before only shared on paper, something really powerful happens. Because as we talked about today, a lot, good writing does depend on just sitting your butt in the chair. But it also really depends on the other things you do around it, the other self-care that you practice, your meditation, your being out in nature, you're being willing to have conversations with people who aren't like you, or the people who are here to say, hi, I'm here to help and be your guide. It's okay to say you don't know. So I'm going to drop the link for that's the marisagowdy.asme/alchemy20 session if you want to set up some time with me tomorrow. And if it doesn't work for you tomorrow, I think you know how to reach out, and we can try to set up another time. But this alchemy work is really at the core of who I am and what I do. And I'm super excited to have had a chance to sit with you all today and share it with you in this new and different way. I think I've been offering it kind of around the side and kind of spinning it this way, because I think a lot of us do that with the most important things we have to share. The parts that seem like they might be a little bit outside of the box, that aren't as clear as like, hi, I'm your writing coach, I'll help you make that essay sound good. It's easy to say that in certain ways, but it's not all that compelling. So I'll own that I'm in my own process of trying to figure out how to make my own work more authentic, more fully integrated, more fully me, in service of making it more compelling to inspire more people to work with me, to be totally honest, but also to say, like, this is how I'm really here to help people, is to give the entire spectrum of what it is that I have to offer. So does anybody else have any other last questions, any last thoughts? I think you all know where to find me in the various social media ways. You can click reply on any email that I send to you. Marisa@marisagowdy.com is my main email address. I'm here for you as a resource. Does anybody have anything else they want to ask about, or?
I just want to say thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't know what your work was before this claiming of what you're integrating now, and so it's resonating with me very much.
Awesome.
And I think that question, I started to think about what are the parts of me that are separate that I don't bring in, or that are just sort of, I don't find purchase somehow in the circles I'm in or in the worlds I'm in. So that to me was one of the big, I hope to work with you more. And but that was one of the big takeaways where I was like, I am such a this, and I never get to talk about it. That's just my private thing that, or there's people in that particular little circle.
Right.
Anyway, so I really enjoyed thinking into that. And yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Just in terms of like purposes of full disclosure, like I was much more in the terms of like, hi, I'll be your writing coach and help you with your blogging, and not tell you that I'm doing secret things
doing the magic
in order to make this work for you. Like I'd be holding a chumpy stone for a client and I would never tell them why.
Okay. Right.
Well, I hold on to harmony because it's related to the fifth chakra, and it helps you, open your throat and be clear. And because the shadow side of harmony is isolation. And what's our biggest fear as writers is that we'll say something and no one will hear us. And, I would sort of very quietly be sending that medicine.
Right,
but what if I can be more clear about it and say, hey, listen, like, what if you sit with what it really means for you to be for harmony? Like, 5, it's a 5-pointed star. What's meaningful for you in that? I bet we could look at a different constellation for you of, oh, these are 5 different stories I want to bring in. Like, it opens up the door to be so much more creative.
Right.
And what we do, because, toe in the bottom line, you're talking with Kathy about the idea of like, would you like beige, gray, or ivory? Like, we don't need that anymore. Like, let's live our lives in full color and tell the full spectrum of our stories as is appropriate.
Right.
Because there's discernment in so much of this. And
I think part of my challenge is that I just live in a bubble. I've never been willing to be white, beige, or gray, or whatever. So I've always just done my own little thing in my own little world. I live abroad a lot so that I don't have to, it makes sense that I'm different, if I'm an expat. So I'm really excited about like, oh, cool. Like that magic stuff, that's probably why I'm resonating now with you. Like before I would have been like, I'm too weird. Then she's doing regular writing, storytelling. So it's really exciting to think about like, oh, okay. Like there's more ways that my own weirdness can be expressed in. Like I listen to you, I'm like, that doesn't sound weird.
Right? Like, what if we can all I end every email I write with some variation of, the storyteller in me sees the storyteller in you. Like, it's because I'm really saying like the absolute weirdo freakosaurus in me really wants to acknowledge the absolute weirdo freakosaurus in you, because I'm so bored of going any other way.
Well, that's what I definitely got here today. So I'm really
Greg, I have to share that there are probably a whole tribe of weirdos out there that you would fit right in that don't even know you exist, and they
love it
too.
Exactly.
And that's kind of what I've uncovered. Like the first time I went to camp, Marisa, I only went the last 2 years, but the first time I went, I said I found my tribe. People onesies and tiger ears,
Exactly. And we all want to be leading with this more.
Yeah.
And there's some sort of story we've swallowed about, well, that's not professional enough, or that's not clear enough. Like, there's value in being a professional, clear spoken human being. Absolutely. But let's all be a little more liberal with the fairy dust.
Yeah.
And like, this is my sparkle. This is how I'm going to show up. And then people are going to care a lot more, because the people who we really respect and honor, we respect them and honor for their bravery and their willingness to like fly the freak flag and be like, this is the thing that matters to me. And then we'll realize too, it's like, oh, that isn't even weird.
Right.
It's just another path. And let's invite some more people down it. Wouldn't it be awesome?
And, Grace, you can introduce that in little ways. I'm just, I do a program. I'm a contract facilitator for the Association for Talent Development. I facilitate one of their 3-day programs around wherever they send me to do it several times a year. And about a little over a year ago, January of 2018, I added some slides in at the beginning where I'm doing who I am and what my background is. And I've added slides that show me ziplining in Thailand, swimming with dolphins, and wearing my unicorn, the unicorn group picture. And I think there's one other I put in there, but anyway, the hang gliding lesson I took in North Carolina. So I started including those as part of This Is Me, and the reaction has been off the charts.
Yeah.
People love it.
Right.
And they say, oh, we see you as a human being now, and you like to have fun, so we know this is going to be a fun time.
Yeah.
And it has really worked well.
Beautiful. More permission to be ourselves. I love it.
Exactly. And then there's moments when it's the permission is to be at your like peak self. Like you're teaching in front of people, like, yeah, let me show up as fun and adventurous and super bold. And then there's other moments when it's like permission to show up as like, I'm walking around in my backyard and I haven't left town in 6 months and I am just here with my feet dirty and I'm being really real. Like that's just as valuable too, as we remember, like it's not just about showing ourselves in our most like, this is me most fabulous, fully realized self. There's also like, this is me in a real moment. And that matters too, like across, and it's picking your times, you know, you're in front of a stage of people. Yeah. Let's all take them peak.
Right.
But you're writing a blog post. Sometimes it's like, hey, I didn't want to do this today. The part of me that didn't want to do this today sees the part of you that didn't want to do this either. Let's find our way through, and being that full humanity. You know, I think it's about living in this both and also consciousness, and realizing that the either or days, I don't want to do anymore. I don't think you guys either. We'll find a new way. So I am so grateful to everyone who's been able to be with us for the whole time, and those who look at this on the recording. I'm here to walk beside you in whatever way that is. And as I am able to, oh my gosh, the red-tailed hawk that just soared right in and sat on the tree. Okay, we're supported, everybody, whether we're here today live or not. Like this is for all of us to fly higher. You know, this is our collective growth and our collective just being able to come together and say, we're in sync with something bigger than ourselves. When we look at our own stories and we look at what we long to say and what we need to say, the parts of ourselves that have been unexpressed, that have been the hidden gems, and we give ourselves permission to incubate them, to alchemize them into something else, we start to change the world because we start noticing things in a new way. We have that exact moment when we look up and see the hawk. I haven't looked up from my screen in 1 hour and 17 minutes, and I did at that moment. Like, this is the magic we're looking for, and we make it happen together. And that's the entire basis of all of my work and the way that I see us doing this stuff. So in any way that I can help you, let me know. I'm here. I'm accessible.
Tomorrow.
What's that?
I signed up for a session tomorrow.
Oh, cool. I guess I have to look forward to tomorrow. Besides just being Friday.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you everybody so much. Again, let me know what you need. Maybe it's to be part of our community, one-on-one support. I do and do not have an agenda. I'll be honest, I'm a woman with a business to run. I have offerings, but I want to support you. So that's why we're all here in this together. So thanks to everybody. I will send out the recording so you can review it and let me know what else you need. Okay.
Thanks a lot, Marissa.
All right. You're so welcome, everybody. Thank you, Grace. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Jennifer, for being here. Thank you, Kathy. See you soon.